All right, all right. Welcome, everyone. This is our Thursday morning production call. What this call is for is helping you produce and help more families and getting you paid. This is a call for licensed agents. I know we got a whole bunch of people hopping on, so just make sure you are licensed, you got your op credentials, and you're able to book appointments and sit with them. If you're not up until that point, no worries. We do this every single Thursday. Go get your license first, and then you can hop on this call. But everyone else that is licensed, what we do today is just we got some topics for y'all. And today's topic is going to be problem solving versus product selling. And I'll kind of dig into the difference of the two and why it's important to know the difference and how we're helping a family. But what I'll start with today is we transfer a lot of information right now. We do this as a whole organization. What I humbly ask is you take notes. Make sure you have a pen and notepad out. Write down a tip. James always talks about it, is make sure you come intentionally to this call. So make sure you have something, right? You take something from this call that you can go put it into an appointment today, right? So that you can start getting a little bit better and helping a family, right? The goal should be about 3 things, and then go apply it to your appointments. And then what I humbly ask as an organization is, if you took something and you used it and it helped you help a family, post that on band, please. Like, be as specific as possible, right? Hey, you know what, James said this or somebody said this, and I said it and it worked. Wow, it helped let me, move forward with the application. And post that on band, because it does help everyone. So as a community, somebody else can say, oh, hey, you know what, that was a good nugget. And so we are able to make sure that I can use it and go help more families, right? So we can work together as a team. This is an open forum, so as long as it's topic and subject related, please feel free to unmute yourself, interrupt us. I want to make sure we answer every single question you have, and it does stimulate conversation. So anything related to the topic, please feel free to unmute yourself and add to it. It really does help us through this training for everyone, because if you're going through it, trust me, other agents are. And before we get started, I want to, Sam, you had a great call today in the morning. And this calls for production, and something I love to teach agents, Sam, is something you talked about. I know me and you talk about it all the time, right? It is feeling the hurt, right? It's feeling the frustration of where you're at. What I love to teach agents is, look, we all get upset, and this is your business. You should be upset with your results, right? Like, you should be able to say, I am not happy where I'm at. But what I love to teach agents is how to channel that anger, or that upsetness, or whatever you want to call it, right? Because sometimes we need to jumpstart ourselves, right? And this is why I love January, because January, a lot of agents are willing to do things they're not normally willing to do, right? Because it's a new year and everyone says, hey, you know what, this is the year, right? Well, how do you make this is the year is exactly what Sam was talking about. So I just want to hit on it a little bit, right? Like, I love to teach you should get upset with your results. You should not be bland. Any business owner in any company get very emotional about how their business is ran and what the results are getting, right? Like, when they look at a graph and they see their business doing this, they should be super excited and stoked. How do I stay there, right? And they continue to fight. But then if they see their businesses like this going down, or it's being flat, a true business owner gets upset because you are not growing, right? But what do you do with that upsetness? The thing is, a lot of us just sit there and get stuck, right? Like, I don't like, right? And we stay quiet. And you need to learn. A lot of our books that you read and plug into teach you to channel your energy, right? So you should learn how to get upset. But what do I do with this upset and anger and energy that's building up, right? Of, I'm not liking where my result. You need to learn how to channel it and put it into dials, right? And put it into sit with more appointments. And Sam, like, you hit the nail right on the head, right? What do I have to do? No matter what, today I am upset with my results. I will have 6 appointments today, right? Like, you have to learn to get upset. James, this is something, right? We were working with you last year, right? Because James would be upset, but he would just get quiet. And I'm like, you can't just sit there and be upset. He goes, because I would ask him, and he was like, yeah, I'm upset. I'm like, okay, but what are you doing with it? Right? You have to learn to not just hold it in, right? You have to, one, you have to release the energy, right? If not, you get stuck in that frustration. but learn to say, hey, today is the 200 dial day. Today is the 300 dial day, 400 dial day. Today is the 10 set appointment day, right? And what I really want to hit on, Sam, is what you said earlier was, am I acting like I'm not doing well? Here's the thing. If you are not depositing money into your bank account, if you are bleeding money, right, by paying bills and you're not finding results, right, does your activity match your situation? Right? Like I want to be a 20K producer. Okay, but does your activity match a 20K producer? Right? Are you booking 6 appointments no matter what for tomorrow? Because if you're booking 2, that's not a 20K producer. Right? Like if, hey man, I'm sitting here going broke, I don't know how long I can be here at Symmetry anymore. Does your activity match that feeling, right? Or those results? Like, does that mean you're like blowing up the phones and dialing 200-300 dials and doing whatever you can, right, to scramble and get more leads? And are you calling your upline every single appointment? Like, does your activity match where you're at? That's not something you answer in public. That's just something y'all have to, right? What's your situation here? And does your activity match that situation? So I love that, Sam, because I remember when I was desperate, right? And I was in a really bad place financially, right? When I first joined Symmetry, let me tell you, my activity matched where I was because I was going to do whatever it took. I needed to deposit $4,600 no matter what, month 1, so that I can at least cover all my bills. And I deposited, I think, 4,800. But my activity matched where I was at, right? Like it took, that's where the 1,000 dials, I was dialing 1,000 dials every single week on like 25 cent or 50 cent leads back then. I think they were dollar leads. Like I was doing whatever it takes. So just make sure, right? It's the beginning of the year. Go with the cliche, right? Like this is the year, right? I want to make sure that I change something. Do the cliche year, right? Like, hey, this is the year I'm going to go to the gym. I'm going to work out my right activity here and just go have some massive results. So I love that topic, Sam. I think it's so well fitted, especially for January. Why? I hope y'all realize that this is make a move month, right? And that just means y'all are willing to do something this month that you probably ain't willing to do February, March, right, or so on, because right, it's the beginning of the year and I want to have 2024 be the year. Just understand, fall into that cliche of, hey, this is the year and I'm willing to do that right now, right? Just don't quit in 9 days. That's all you got to do. Continue to do it for the next 6 months and you'll be amazed of where you can be here at Symmetry. So I love that topic, right? The training, take the nugget. Does your activity match where you're at? And does your activity match the results you want, right? 20K producers, you must have 6 appointments for tomorrow, no matter what. I don't care if you're telling me you're running interviews, if Ninja Dialer broke, if, right, like I can't get to the excuses, right? Like McDonald's does not close the door because somebody doesn't show up. McDonald's does not close the door because a fryer broke. Like business must continue, right? And this is the same thing for y'all. Like you must have 6 appointments. Your doors must be open so you can be in business. So thank you for that topic, Sam. You got me fired up. That's the nugget. I leave y'all with that. On to the next topic is, right, how do we help a family, right? How are we solving a problem versus product selling? First, I want to touch on the subject of how do I identify if I'm problem solving versus, problem solving versus selling a product, right? And because it's a very thin line. And Jordan, I'm not going to take credit for this. Jordan gave me some really cool nuggets of how to identify if you're doing either or. So really the first one is, are you getting declined on product, right? So are you getting declined on the policy you're writing? And then the biggest one is, are you getting cancellations a month later to 2 months later, right? Like, do you have chargebacks? Okay. If you're doing your job properly, you should only be getting, God, if you're writing like I would say every 30 to 50 apps, you maybe get 1 cancellation if you're doing your job properly. Like I get very, very few cancellations. The only email I ever get is they weren't able to draft. I simply call that client, hey, you know what? They didn't draft. Can they draft tomorrow? Yep, great, boom. Policies never goes lapse, right? But if you're getting chargebacks, right? That just means you sold a product, you didn't solve their solution. So when they see that bill on the 15th, right, they're just like, I don't need this, right? Because it was a product. I don't need this TV, right? I don't need this policy, right? That was just a product that they invested, right? How many of y'all buy something and then you play with it with the first when it got delivered and then you put it in your drawer and never see it again, right? That was a product, right? That's one thing I got all the time. I see this problem, like, oh, sweet, that's a cool product, right? I buy it, play with it for a little bit, and then I never touch it again. That's a product, right? Versus something, if you help a family solve a solution, right, their problem, right, it's completely different because they need it. So when the 15th come and they draft $110 out of their bank account, I'm like, oh, yeah, because if I pass away, Mary has the problem solved, right? Like she will not lose our home, right? That is the difference between the two, right? Making sure you understand that, right? And how to identify, hey, I need to get better at problem solving versus selling product. Those are the two signs, right? You're either getting declined when you're writing it because they're probably not the right fit, and the biggest one is are you getting declines? And then also if you're getting too much think about it. If you're getting a little too many think about it, you may just be looking at products. What's another sign of products? Price, right? Like, oh, I'm going to go right. Here's a good one. Are you always going straight to SBLI because it's the cheapest policy? That's a product. You're not solving a problem. You're selling a product, right? Am I always going to only an accidental? You have a price issue, right? You're only selling on the price, right? That's a product. You're not solving their problem, right? When you truly learn to transition to solving the problem, not only will you sell better products, you will have higher APV. I went through this struggle. I remember this so specifically because I started writing a whole bunch of apps when I came in, and this is 2018. We're probably looking at like July and August. I'm starting to write about 10, 15 apps a month, right? And I'm getting excited. But man, they're little apps, right? I used to call them baby apps. I'd have $30 apps, $40 apps. And I'm like, and I see everybody post these $2,000 APVs, but mine never breaks 1,000 APV. That means it was never over 80 bucks, right? You have a product problem, right? How to best solve this is you got to hear what your client really needs, right? When you truly start to do that, it's amazing of how all of a sudden you thought you were going to show, right, an $80 policy, but you're selling a $250 policy because it solves the problem that they want solved. So look at your APV too. That's also an indicator that maybe you're selling product versus solving problems. Because let me tell you, people will pay whatever it takes to get what they want. Like it's amazing if you've ever had that appointment where you ran a really good appointment and it clicked for the client. Like, oh man, like Joe, I know where we're at, Joe, and I want the house paid off for Mary. Right. And all of a sudden you went from looking at $100 app to, hey, it's you understand, John, it's $275. Yeah. I want the entire house paid off because he had a problem that he wanted to solve and you assisted. Right. Sometimes it clicks for them on their own, but we're going to teach you today, right, a couple of things of how to you identify that and help them get to there. So Mike, you got your hand up, buddy.
Yeah, Joe, I was just going to ask you to get into it, but it sounds like you're going to do that now. So I'll just sit on my.
Tell me what to do, Mike.
Well, you got an assistant now, so you got all this time.
I like it. We're going to figure out a whole bunch of stuff now.
Congratulations, by the way.
Thanks. James, you want to add to any of that before we get into anything? I don't know if you heard it. James, you want to get into anything before, or you want to say anything to those topics before we get into it?
I got some tips on there, but it's really just going into products and kind of identifying it, so I'm gonna hold off.
Okay, well, sweet. Well, first, I like to talk about don'ts first, right? Because we do a lot of them, and my favorite thing to do, at least how I like to get better, is I like to identify what I'm doing wrong, right? So here's a couple of things that'll help you identify, right, if you're not really paying attention to the client. So I know we case work every single case before you should be, right? Case working before your appointment. But a sign you're not maybe listening to the appointment is every casework you work up, that's what you write. Right? Like you never pivot. Like, hey, every time I book an appointment and I have all the information and I set up for it, right? I set up, right? I'm going to do the full mortgage payoff, equity, whatever. But and then the same prices for it, right? You pick your three options, but you should be good enough to where most of them will be right. But if every single one, that's all you ever write, you are not listening to your client. Like it is impossible to say that every single prep I made, right, was the exact fit, right? Like before I heard anything in that they told me, like I already predicted what they had. Like we get a good idea of it. But if you're never having to change options, change prices, right? Maybe you stay on the same option, but maybe you just adjust the price, right? Or the coverage. I need more coverage. I need less coverage. If you never change any of that on every appointment that you run, you're probably product selling, right? So that's a good one to identify. You should pivot. I would say, I don't know, James, a good 30%, right? Anywhere from 30 to 20%, right? So if you have 10 appointments and you prep for them, right? Maybe 7 of them is what was a good fit for them, but there should be at least 3 or 4 that you're having to change something.
Yeah, that's super good. And it's just I mean, I would just check with your upline, get with them before every appointment. You'll be surprised sometimes we're over quoting people when you're showing them options as well. So you kind of get into that. Or if you're not writing nothing but accidentals, you kind of see that part.
Oh, you know it's a good one. So how many of y'all have a policy on yourself, right? So if you have a policy on yourself, if you only sell what you have, you're probably product selling, right? So if you have a CBO 100, right, or you have an accidental, or you have an IULE, and that is the only thing that you're like, that's the majority of your business to clients. You're not helping the client. You're just selling them what you know, right? That's a product. Like you believe in the product, that's why you have it. But if that's what you're right, keep putting in front of your clients, that you're not problem solving, right? You're selling a product that you believe in because that's why you got it, right? So that's also a sign that, hey, maybe you're not case working correctly, right? You're not problem solving. You're selling the same thing that you have, right? And I've seen that with a lot of new agents, right? If a new agent comes in here and they get an IULE, oh my God, they're selling all these IULEs. I'm like, yeah, that's not normal, right? If you come in here and you get an accidental and that's all you sell, that's not normal, right? Just realize those are kind of signs, right? That maybe you need to look at, are you really listening to your clients? I don't know, anything else you can think of, James?
I think if you go into where your Quilly or Opt, they'll show you kind of a mixture of what you're writing. It should be pretty much balanced out. More whole life, accidental. I mean, a whole life or terms. Should be got a good mixture of them. So you can look at the ratio on there. I think what's the the dash, the performance
Dash,
dash
performance dash. Oh, that's a
has
good
has
tool.
it
Yeah.
on there on the bottom, and it shows you what you're writing. So that's a good gauge on there as well. Um,
Yeah, because your balance should be right. It should be almost a third of everything. Should be a third accidentals, a third of term, and a third of final expense. Right? Because that should be a really mix. Why a third? Because you should be matching accidentals, right? We teach all of you they're 70 or below, you should be right either selling the a term or mortgage protection or a final expense, but always matching that accidental, right? So if you do that, right, if you have the two and they're each a third, that accidental should match, pretty close to the majority of those. So look at your performance dash. It's a great tool. I'm glad you brought that one up. Look at it, right? If you see you're too strong on one of them, I would get with your upline just to make sure, right? Again, you're problem solving, not product selling. Because a big one, right, is going to be that you're selling just what you have, because that's what you're comfortable with, right? Versus making sure we're finding the right thing for the client. I don't know, anything else, James, before we move on to how to
little side
find.
note on that performance dash, it actually tells you how you're doing on there, and you could actually put your income of what you're actually looking to make, and it'll tell you based off your percentage on your PPL, how many leads of the leads you're taking you should be getting based on your numbers. So, and you
Love
can
it.
actually be filling that out. It'll actually help you. If you don't fill your numbers out, fill it out on there. It'll definitely help you track your numbers. Little side note.
And I like that one. Performance dash is pretty cool. If y'all haven't played with it, play around with it. Make sure you do it outside of work hours. Don't sit there for an hour when you should have been dialing. But now, right, so what are tips we can get? I want to equip y'all, right, to make sure I help you identify and help problem solve. So the best place to start problem solving is actually in the rapport building, right? We've kind of talked about this in some other calls, and we're going to get into the things you're identifying and learning to pivot, because that's how you truly problem solve. But in the rapport building part, right, are gathering really good information, right? James is always really good at talking about, right? Are you listening to where they're from, where their kids are at, right? What they would do if something were to happen, right? Do they have two kids? Are they younger? Are they older, right? If they're a single family, right? When I say single family, one parent and kids, right? Are you asking where are the kids? What would happen, right? Really rapport building and gathering information. Remember, the rapport building helps you bring down their walls. But if you master rapport building, you are gathering a ton of information that you'll be able to use. I don't like to use the word against them, right? But you can use to get them out of their own way to find their problem, right? And how to solve it. Because everyone's going to tell you, I can't afford it. It's out of my budget or this and that, right? But when you truly identify and when you're rapport building and you're hearing, hey, my father grew up in this house and I ended up taking it over and I had to get a loan against it because of this or that, right? And then you solve a problem and you remember, trust me, the budget goes out the window. They don't care what it takes because they want to solve that problem, right? So in the rapport building is a really big place to making sure you're asking really good questions. The good questions to ask, right, is where are you from? How long have you been at work? Right? These are questions that are equipping you to be able to help that family, right, later on, right? Not just what's your favorite basketball team and stuff like that. Do all that stuff, but make sure in your rapport building, you're gathering information that's gonna be useful to you, right? How many kids do you have? Sometimes it's like, oh, I got 3 kids, but 2 of them I don't talk to because they're crazy, right? But there's this one that lives with me, and this is the one I want to take care of, right? That's a pain point that is going to allow you, well, John, you said you wanted to take care of Susie, right? Your daughter that's 20 years old, and the other kids have kind of gone and left, and you're saying you want to be able to help her, right? Well, that's a tool for you, right? If you're picking up on that, on the rapport building. Anything else on rapport right there, James, for gathering information?
Yeah, rapport is really the main foundation where you're gonna get all that information for. Remember, that's how you're getting that icebreaker for them to drop the wall. So finding something that relates to them, uh, getting names. Hey, how many kids you got? Oh, what are their names? What are their age groups? Hey, I have a kid. I tell him my name. What's his birthday, his age. Make sure you're giving back information as well and write this information down. So when you're using it, or we're not using it, but when you're explaining the solution for them, you're name dropping, you're personalizing versus, hey, you and your kids, hey, Mary and little Susan, and whatever the case, you're gonna personalize it. It's gonna build that emotion up a lot more versus you and your kids, or hey, it's gonna protect your family.
I
You're
like
gonna
it.
personalize it for them because everybody's different, and you're gonna find out of what they're doing, and make sure you're giving information back. You're building a friend, that relationship. You want not just that. If you want ASRs too, referrals and stuff. That's how you get those referrals. You built that emotion. Your friend, hey, I'm giving you the best option. That's also gonna help you with cancellations when other people are calling them there as well. But no, no, I'm working with somebody. I trust them.
Right. And I want to make sure I give y'all, right, we equip y'all to go be able to help yourself with this, right? So a good exercise that you can do by yourself or a running buddy, right? Like call one of your running buddies and be like, hey, let's put together a list of good 10 questions that equip us when we're building rapport. And I challenge you to go do that, right? Like, don't just go run your appointment today and hope you remember some of these questions, right? Before your appointment, what are your 10 questions on rapport that equip you, right? That give you information that you can use later on to help close, right? So that's a challenge for you. Make it yourself, right? Why I say make it yourself. For me, they're family questions. That works for me. I got 4 kids, but if you don't got 4 kids, maybe that's not the route you take to help build, right? Because for me, it makes it easy. Oh yeah, I got 4 little kids too, right? I want to make sure they stay in a good spot. That works for me. If you don't have kids, that probably doesn't work for you, right? But have a list of a good, I would say 8 to 10 questions, right? So that when you go into an appointment, these are my 8 questions that I ask that equip me in the rapport building, right? Make it fun. Get with one of your running buddies and say, hey, let's come up with 2, with a couple of questions that we'll both use in our appointments. And then let's see how they worked out. Hey, this one told me this, right? Like y'all got to help make yourself get better. I love what James was talking about a couple of weeks ago, right? Like he made sure every single day he was giving himself one more tool to be better in the appointment, right? So yes, you're on this call, but I want to give you all a tool to go use today in your appointment, right? So before you run your appointments, what are 10 questions you're going to ask, right? So go into it equipped and prepared so that that'll help you for that. The next one, right, is, okay, rapport building allows us to help problem solve. Where else can I find information that's going to help me problem solve? One of the second biggest one is going to be in the FIF, right? The financial information form. I really want to lean into this one, right? FIF is not a reset, right? I know a lot of us hear the word FIF and we instantly think Betsy Bar, right? It's not a reset. An FIF is a financial information form. That means you are gathering information. Do you know why you're gathering this financial information? Can anyone unmute and tell me why you're gathering this financial information?
To find their very specific need and what amount of coverage they need.
To literally, the topic of today, solve their problem, right? So if you don't do a financial breakdown, right? And this is I'm talking to you if you're running appointments and you're not doing an FIF, that means getting all their financial information. If you are not doing a true financial income breakdown, right? How much money's coming in from who? How much a month? What are expenses coming out? Somebody passes away. How much do we lose? If you're not doing that and you don't have how much are they putting aside for savings, and then you show options, I'm telling you, I'm saying this with so much love, you're doing a horrible job in your appointment. I really want you to understand that, right? We teach y'all to follow the real script. If you are not doing that income breakdown, right, an expense breakdown and what's left over, if you're not doing that and you get to the slides, right, or you get to the point where you're talking about options, I'm going to show you mortgage protect, you are doing a bad job. I'm saying that with so much love because I want you to get better, right? Why? Because how are you showing something without knowing the problem? How are you providing a solution? That would be like a doctor. You were in my waiting room, right? That means I booked the appointment, you sat down, you showed up, and then they finally walk you into my office and I'm the doctor, right? And the nurses didn't weigh you. The nurses didn't take your high blood pressure or your blood pressure. No one did anything for you. And then I got into the office and I just looked at you and I said, this prescription will help you. That would be horrible, in the morning. How am I prescribing? Yeah, take 2 of these in the morning and you're going to feel great and you'll stay perfectly healthy. That is impossible, right? The doctor has to ask you all kinds of questions. What are you, right? How are you feeling? How does this work, right? Hey, you know what? We just took your blood pressure. It's really high. What's going on, right? Like they have to, right? If you're diabetic, they got to take your blood sugar, right? Then they could prescribe us a solve for the problem, right? So I say this with so much love. If you are showing options and you are not doing a breakdown of any kind, right? And it has to be really good, right? How much income is coming in?
All right, you need to leave. It's 11:32.
So how much income is coming in from husband or wife, right? Or whoever's involved. How much expenses are going out? You should have the total, right? So, hey, we got $5,000 coming in a month. We have $3,000 going out. I want to make sure, Randy, we're talking about the same thing. It looks like we have $2,000 in disposable income. Is that correct or not? Why? When you're in the doctor's office, they say, right, if you say, hey, this hurts, he goes, does it hurt right here? Right? on a scale of 1 to 10, how much pain? 6 or 7, right? He wants to know, he has to reaffirm he understands the situation. You must do the same thing. Reaffirm you understand their financial situation. So Rodney, you're telling me you have $2,000 in disposable income after this. No, Joe, you know what? That's not right. Okay, well, where do you think it's going? Oh, well, I also have, right, I pay for my kids' sports. I also have the credit cards I didn't talk about. Okay, so let's put that in there. Okay, so now you're telling me there's only 2,000 in disposable income. Yes, that sounds about right.
I just want to reemphasize, that's a big one. Make sure you ask after you go off the budget, hey, does this look right? A lot of times, at least I say half the time, they're gonna be like, oh, you know what? It's actually a little bit less. I forgot to include this. Or hey, sports, or I do this. And then another one, make sure you're asking if they have any life insurance that they own, not through work, any benefits to work, something they're paying for.
And here's the thing, right? You gotta love your clients. You really do. How many of y'all think you're someone you just met on Zoom for the very first time and you're asking them uncomfortable financial questions, especially, right? And I say this on a man's perspective, right? It's very disrespectful for another man to ask another man, say, so you only have $500 left over a month, right? That was something, it was very hard for me to overcome that question, right? Because I'm a Hispanic male, right? Machismo is a real thing, right? It was very uncomfortable because at least in the Hispanic world, you don't ask another male how much money they have in their bank account. Super disrespectful, right? So it was hard for me to overcome that, but we have to. We get paid on asking very difficult questions, right? So realize this, we're talking to real humans. They have an ego, and you got to give them the grace of the ego, right? That means the first time you go through their budget, they're probably fibbing a little bit. Not because they're bad people, just because they're embarrassed, right? They got an ego. You gotta allow that to kind of brew and build that relationship, right? But hey, Nathan, I just want to make sure, right? $2,000 extra a month. That's what we're talking about. Then,
No way. I only have 200. That's what they say, Joe.
oh my God, right? Like when you reaffirm that question, all of a sudden half of what you said, right? So be careful with that, right? Because if you take the first answer and then you're like, oh, sweet, I got $2,000 of disposable income. And then you go show a $200 policy and they're like, I got to see if it fits the budget. What do you mean? You just didn't do a good job, right? It wasn't that they were that they were lying to you purposely. They just had an ego. They're a human being, and you're asking them difficult questions. Right? Be a real person with your appointment. Truly care, right? Mike.
Quick question, if I could, Joe.
Yes, ma'am. Absolutely. Go.
When I'm analyzing the situation, a lot of times people have just moved into the home, so they aren't aware of what their utilities are. And so I would say that kind of holds me up from being able to really analyze, because they do not want to give me any kind of budget, even though they could be like, oh, it'll be no more than $500 or so, they don't want to give an answer. And then I feel like that also sets me up for I need to think about it at the end of the appointment, because they say, well, I really want to see where my bills end up before I commit to budgeting what I can afford per month on some sort of protection. What's your recommendation for that?
That's a great question because we do get that a lot, right?
I'll answer that one. I get that a lot as well. So best way to ask this too, if they're coming from another house, I ask them, how big is the house and how big was your other house? Most likely it'll be around the same. I always round up, so you get what they're paying before wherever they're at. And I always round up regardless, just to give them leeway if there's a bigger house or if they have kids now, whoever else is moving in. I ask who is in there. Is it the same? They get a bigger house, or they moving in with somebody, and just kind of round up and just ask what they were paying before. Oh, what were you paying before? Roughly get an estimate. Hey, we're just gonna round up. You're from apartment now to a house. What's the square footage? Oh, it's about the same. Okay, but it's still gonna be a little bit more. Just get a house, just round up.
And I love what James is saying there, and an add-on before you start saying what James said there, right? Is it's all about confidence, right? Oh yeah, I deal with that every single day. Most families that I talk to, because this is a new home, we do exactly that. Let's go over what's the word I'm thinking for? Let's go through the process of understanding your budget. because I do this in every single appointment. They can't tell you anything because you're the professional, right? So, yep, yeah, we do this every single time. No worry. Let's go through the process. So, how big was your home? How big was your new home? Okay, so the electric bill is going to be around the same, right? Oh, a few more square footage. Great. Let's add $50 is what we do, right?
Or a lot of times it's might be even less because, hey, the kids moved down. Now we just got our own place, or vice versa. So you can play the counter if, you know, be a little bit more or a little bit less. I always just keep it the same if it's the, you know, worst case, I'd rather over quote them or their budget higher than what they have.
Right. And remember, we are still salesmen, and you still got to make sure you help them get out of their own way. And how do you solve that problem? Right, breaking down their finances really good, and they're telling you, well, I just moved into this. Oh, great. So if they tell you, hey, I just moved in, I don't know what my bills are. Guess what they did? They sold you on we can't do this today, right? Versus who's the professional, right? Who's asking questions is gonna be the one in control. So, okay, great. We deal with that every single appointment. In fact, the last two, it was the exact same situation as you. So this is how we solve that, right? What house, how big is your house? How big was the house we moved into, right? Now they can't tell you that's an excuse because you deal with that excuse every single day. You are the professional, right? So that's a great question. I hope that helps. Michael, you had a question too, buddy.
Yeah, Joe. So, James, you remember a couple months ago, you did the Zoom appointment for us and you showed us how you go through the PowerPoint presentation and everything. When you are doing this FIF, do you use the FIF resource form on Quility? So you actually put the client in there and go through it with them and enter the line items there so they can see it on the Zoom appointment with you? Or are you jotting this down in your notebook and then going back and saying, hey, it looks like you got about, $500 a month left after your budget? How are you doing that, James or Joe?
I do both. I recommend just doing it on there because it's an extra step for me, but it's just a habit I had to do. So it's an extra step. I write it down and then plug it in. But I would plug it in and you could just literally have it open. And that way, if you're not comfortable with it, I used it at first. I actually used the sheet, but use the form there. If you don't know what to ask, go over it before your appointment. That way you don't miss. So that's a good one. It's a great tool to use. So you're asking all the questions, so you don't miss anything.
I would say we don't
Just
use
use
it
the form.
because someone's uncomfortable. You should be using the one online. It's an actual live calculator, right? So
It'll save you time and
it's
adds it
gonna
all
save
up.
you time from having to add it all up,
And
right?
it'll
You
make
can
sure you
put
don't miss
him,
anything.
her, income, and it makes sure it makes sure you don't miss anything. And then at the end, it shows you, right, what their budget should be left over. And if you're sharing your screen, it should be very easy. Michael, are we looking at the same thing? It looks like you have $5,000 in disposable income. No, that's not true, Joe. Okay, well, let's go back in here. Do you see anything in here, right? Insurance, look at, like, we have these options. Anything in here that you think we should add? You're not good at FIF resets. Doing it online is going to get you good at finding 401ks. Who wants a $20,000 deposit like Mr. Randy Law, right? If you follow the FIF reset, it makes you put retirement stuff that they have, right? Extra stuff. It makes you ask the questions. Do you have a 401k? Do you have, right, a CD? Do you have a big savings account? Right? A lot of y'all ask, right? Like after we did that and we did the training, everyone's like, oh my God, Joe, how do I get better at asking these questions? Hey, guess what? It was probably just following the system and running a real script, right?
And if
So
you're showing,
I would 100% recommend get online, right? Get for your appointment. That means pull up the lead and you can already have that FIF open up for that lead. And then you just, when you want to run a really good appointment, it makes you ask the questions in order and you will not miss anything. And then if you're sharing your screen, running a Zoom appointment like you should be, makes it even easier because then it's not you, right? It's like, hey, are we looking at the same thing? It says here you have $3,000 of disposable income.
Yep. And for anybody who's new, that form is under My Clients in HQ. So you just go over to HQ, navigate on the left-hand side, go down to My Clients, and you'll see new FIF.
Yep.
So,
yeah,
You type in the client and it pulls it up.
and then show it to the client because they'll actually help you out and be like, hey, I don't have a 401k.
They're proud. Yeah, they're
Those-
proud.
Those like, oh, I'm contributing this much, or I'm actually gonna up it, or I have an old one. They'll start answering for you. You'll be surprised.
Mm-hmm. Right. And then you'll get a little tingly feeling when they say, oh yeah, I got an old 401k with 500,000 in it. It's a $10,000 deposit for you. Right? Allow yourself, right? Here's the thing. Why is Symmetry Financial so successful? They don't want to get rid of an agent with technology. They want to equip an agent with technology. Are we using everything in front of us to be the best version of an agent for them? Right? Which that's going to make you more income. So I would highly, highly recommend only and every single time fill it out online, right? Because it's going to allow you to ask all the questions and not miss anything and get really good at what you're doing.
And that's a big one. If you're not doing an FIF reset, that needs to be a non-negotiable in your appointment, because 99% of the time, what are you gonna get?
I
Think
need to
about
look at
it.
my
Let
budget.
me look at my budget. You might as well just stop doing it if you skip it.
Right. Another tool or a sign that you didn't break down the budget correctly, right? Because again, allow them to have an ego. They're human. You just met them. If you're talking, especially think about this, if you're talking to an old vet, right, that's 65 years old, and we're a 30, 40-year-old young person, right? And we're asking them about their budget. Do you understand? They're old school, like we're being disrespectful, asking them how much money's in their bank account. We're being disrespectful, asking them, hey, Michael, so it looks like you only got a month and a half worth of bills in your bank. Do you know how insulting and attacking that is? So they're not going to tell us the truth. So allow them to have that ego, right? Because if when you run your appointment and you show options and they tell you, I need to think about this, or I need to look at my budget, you should be able to answer back. Well, hey, we looked at your budget. It looked like we have $5,000 left over. Or we had, right, 500 left over, and we're showing you an $80 policy, right? That still should leave you 420. Are we not on the same page? Right? If you can't combat it with that, that means you didn't do a good FIF, right? You can't problem solve something you don't really understand, right? Holly?
I've tried using the FIF on HQ, and I've really struggled with it on the side of showing it to the clients, just because the font is so small and they can't see it. They're watching on their phone. Any workarounds to that?
Try not to get them on their phone, right? So I would make sure you prep them, right? Like, hey, where are you going to be when we get on this appointment, right? Are you going to be on your phone or on your computer? If it is the phone, it is what it is, right?
Just have them write it down then.
Yeah.
We'll go along with it. Like if you want to grab a pen and paper, we'll go along. I know the font's small.
Right. So
People say
if you
that.
follow the real script, right, it says, hey, grab a pen and paper. Let's write down the line, right? We're going to put Mary on this side, John on this side, right? And then Mary, you're bringing in X amount of dollars. John's bringing in X. We got expenses coming out on this box. We're going to put expenses, right? We got the mortgage, the bills, this, that. We're going to minus that out. And so they should have it in front of them if you're doing it correctly that way too.
Okay, thanks.
Mm-hmm.
Joe or James, do you guys have a different approach with single individuals? Same.
Same. Everybody's
I
same.
think it works even better with a single
Easier
individual,
with one because you don't have to make sure.
because
both
there's no
are there.
replacement, right? So as long as you got the single person and we know who we're protecting, there is no sub income, right? Versus when you have a husband and wife, you still have to combat the fact that they still can create an income.
I guess what I meant, single person, kids outside of the home.
Even better.
Yeah, so same approach.
A single person should be a stronger close. Again,
More of a
no
need,
matter
more
what,
need.
because there's no other income, right? Like there's no one else that can step up and say, hey, I'm going to replace this. So, and then usually a single person that's protecting their kids, their why is just a little bit bigger because they know there's no other half, right? So they want to make sure, hey, I at least, right? I don't want my kids to I don't want them to have that burden. Any other questions on that? That was a good one. All right. So back on the finances, right? Another really good one to be able to problem solve is asking the question, right? So you've broken down whatever their budget is, and you can truly answer, hey, we're looking at the same thing, Nathan. You have 2,500 of leftover. how much of that is going into savings? Okay, that's a really, really big one, because understand this, if whatever they have left over, right, is probably what their living money, right? I go to the movies, I go eat, I go do this. People don't want to change that, right? That you're going to try to affect their everyday lives if you try to hit that budget. So if you get good at asking the question, how much of this do you put into your savings account? And then whatever they tell you, then you get to say, hey, I'm not going to change your budget. We're just going to redirect some of your savings accounts. Right? Because then nothing changes in their household. You get to say, hey, instead of putting $500 in the bank, we're going to put $400 in the bank, and we're going to redirect 100 into this policy. They're doing the exact same thing, but realize dollar for dollar in the bank, in a year, you only got $1,200. In this policy, you have $30,000 if you pass. The bank doesn't do that. This policy does. Right? It positions yourself in a very, very strong place for them not to tell you, I need to think about it or anything like that. And, right, we talked about chargebacks or people canceling, right? When they see the bill come out every month, it didn't affect today's life. They just redirected some of their savings account, right? They're still moving those same $400, $500. 4 goes here, 100 goes to the policy. Right? The odds of them keeping it in place forever or longer, right, are very, very high. So, right, that's how you're helping them solve their problem. And then anything on budget before we move on to the next one. Right? So the biggest thing here I think we've identified is making sure we're using the online FIF. Highly, highly recommend, so that y'all can go in there and do every single slot. Right? And everybody on here, right, has seen what has happened with FIF resets, right? That will allow you to ask in every single appointment, do you got an old 401k? Do you have, right, a money market account? That's where you identify, right? Go find one of those a year and you'll be very happy, right? So the next one on the problem solving is more of the question asking, right? So at this point, right, we've built rapport, we got information that we can use, right? We have a really good financial breakdown, so we know how to solve their problem. But remember, this is an emotional sale. That's what I want y'all to remember, right? This is an emotional sell. Why is it an emotional sell? Something that makes sense is something you can see every single day, right? If I go buy if I invest $5,000 on a big screen TV, I get to walk into my living room every single day and see that bad boy, right? This is an emotional sell because it's a piece of paper that gets put into a drawer and they never see it again, right? So the emotion has to be so well established that every 15th of the month, they remember you and they remember that emotion, right? So great questions to ask on the emotional part, right? It is, right? You understand the financial breakdown, right? One of the biggest ones, hey, Mary, we're looking at, right? You only bring in $500 a month. John, you bring in $3,000. I just want to make sure I'm looking at the same picture. John, you're gone tomorrow, God forbid, right? Does any of that $3,000 go to Mary? Well, no, it's just my job income. Okay. So Mary, what does that picture look like for you? How many months do you have of mortgage payments? Right? That's an emotional question. Right? John, how do you feel about you being gone and leaving Mary in that situation? Mary, how do you feel about being in that situation? Right? Who was that new agent? I think on the Gillum's team, right? That was a lead themselves, right? She told us that emotional question. She was like, I don't want, right? My brother, right, is a little sick, and I want to make sure, God forbid something happens, he's taken care of. Somebody asked her that emotional question, right? And they pulled it out, and she remembers it. She remembers it so much. She said, I need to write this, right? Because remember, if y'all paid attention, she was actually a client from months ago, finally came back. That question was so strong in her mind that she finally reached back out and said, hey, I need to put this policy in place. That emotional question was so strong. She said, hey, you know what? What do y'all do? I'm interested in doing what y'all do. That's how strong that emotional question was, right? James, anything? I know you got some good ones, right? What do we call those questions? I think Elijah gave it a name one time.
Power questions.
Power questions. That's what it was.
I got 3 more too here. First one is you're trying to build the motion first. So the first question, what was your main concern in terms of putting protection in place for your family?
Right. And that's such a big one, right? Because guess what? They're literally telling you why they want this. Right? Because when you ask that question, and here's the thing, a lot of new agents will ask us, "Well, I asked that question," and they said, "I don't know." Well, guess what? That's not a client.
And a big one, another one is if your spouse were to pass away, what would that look? What would that situation look like from a financial standpoint? And then you ask vice versa, each one. And then the third one is, would you want to stay in the home or move? And then if they say they do want to stay, you're gonna add a follow-up question is, if you stay in the home, can you afford to? And then if they say they move, where would they move to? Would they rent? Would they move with family, buy another home? Don't worry about writing these down. These are all on the questions in the PowerPoint if you're using the slide.
Right. And what I love about that, right, is not settling. Remember, allow them to have an ego. You just met this person, right? They're not going to open up to you. So they're going to give you their first response is usually very blanketed, right? What is that situation financially going to look for you, Danelle, right? If David passes away, well, not good. What do you mean, right? Don't settle for not good. What do you mean? Well, I don't know. I'd be in a bad spot. Well, what like I get to help families with this, Danelle. So let's break down that financially a little bit. Right? What do you mean not good? So how much, right? So it looks like we lose $3,000 from David. What does that leave for you a month? Even though you know the answer. Right? And something I was horrible at, and I still have to correct myself, is don't answer for them. Right? So what does that leave for you a month? Because if you're Joe and you're in the zone and you forget, what I do is it looks like we have $300, right? I answer it for them. Let them say, right? So what does that look like monthly for you? Well, right, then they're gonna say, you stay quiet. They got to answer it for real, right? Well, it
That's a
looks
big
like
one. You'll be surprised, just awkward. And then just best way to do it, look down, like if you're gonna write what they're gonna say. That way they have to answer.
right, and write down what they say.
Yeah. And then another one, if just make sure that they don't follow up, you got to dig into that, or what they're going into. And then whatever they say, a great one is, hey, we should probably put something in place today, shouldn't we?
And then quiet.
Yes. You'll be surprised that, yeah, we should. Yes. You just got okay to write application.
Right? Because again, right? Trust me, I'm trying to better myself. I answer that question for them. You should probably put something in place today. What do you think, right? And then I'm like, it looks like I answer it for them. Let them, right? Be quiet. It is so hard. It is very uncomfortable, right? Be quiet and let them answer. Sam.
So when you're talking with a 65 plus couple, Joe and James, and you ask that question, do you want to stay in the home, or would you move? Would you leave and just sell it and get the equity out? I struggle with when a couple in that demographic says they want to stay, right? Because automatically I'm going critical period with them, right? So do you have like a good, and I know I need to stay on the critical period, right? But like, how do I stand my ground as the consultant, as the agent, of making them realize that staying in the home may not be an option? This is your best option, right? Is to maybe move, to leave the home, get that equity out, and go downsize somewhere, or something like that. But what is your go-to with a situation like that where you really need to stand your ground? Because I feel like I haven't been able to help some families because of that scenario.
That's a great question, because this is where we pivot to become a product seller versus a problem solver, right? Because this is where who tries to write foresters in this situation? right? Who tries to go right to these cheaper policies, right? And try to go write a term when you know they ain't gonna get qualified, right? You're trying to go sell a product, right? Based on what they told you. You're not truly solving their problem. This just means, Sam, right? You still got to understand a little bit better of the true problem that we are solving, right? Now, here's the thing. Sometimes we're going to solve the problem not the way they think, right? Everybody, how many of y'all, right, are talking to someone that had a heart attack, right, this year? And man, I want 300,000, Joe. I want to pay off my house. Bet they do. Of course they do. They just thought they were going to die. They want to get as much coverage as possible, right? It's still believing in how we're solving their problem and helping them understand, right? And this is where you got to be real with your client, right? Like, hey, Sam, you know, right, again, putting them back into the herd mentality. Sam, I hear that a lot, right? Most folks want to get the whole thing paid off and they're willing to pay whatever it takes, right? My job is to put you, right? Communicate what your job is, right? My role and purpose. My job is to put you in the best, right? And get you the most amount of coverage based on your age and health. Families in your situation with, right? Poke the bear, with a heart attack this year, right? With this is how we can help solve your solution, right? But now they're like, okay, but I still owe 200,000 and you're only giving me a year's worth of mortgage payments. How does this solve my problem? Let me explain how it solves your problem, John, right? Because I hear this a lot, right? Don't make sure they don't feel like this is the one person that you're telling that you're only getting them a year's worth of mortgage payment. No, that's 80% of our casework, right? So most families, they have to, right? This is the way we're able to solve this solution and help make sure, right? So what we're able to do in y'all's family situation is we're going to get you a year's worth of coverage. Now, Mary, your job within this year is we're helping buying you time so you don't lose the home in 3 months. Because based on our financial breakdown that we just did, it looks like you can't afford the house for more than 2. Are we looking at the same thing? Well, yeah. Okay. So now with this policy, Mary, we're giving you 12 months. In 12 months, what you're going to have to do, Mary, is figure out if you can refinance the home, right? Get a loan against the home, right? It's going to allow you, right? We're giving you a solve to be able to stay in the home as long as you can, right? But you got to offer them a solution. Only way you offer a solution is you actually care, right? Like, yeah, it's a little more work. You got to think about their situation and how 12 months, how 6 months, how 3 months, right? How many breakdowns do we do, James, right? And it's like they have 0 leftover money, right? They got $200. They can't afford 3 months worth. So 3 months will save their home, right? Now, whether
Then
you
you
can
come
stay
up with
in
a
it, I'm just giving you a
solution.
solve.
Yeah. And that's a big one, coming up with not just finding the problem. Make sure you come up with a solution to fix it and telling them the need. Hey, so we can't afford the payment. Our budget's low, so we can't even get close. I don't think you want a 500 another car payment just trying to even get close to your mortgage. Oh, I don't want that. So I always say that. Oh, I don't want that. So what more families in your situation do is we do equity protection, and that's when you go into it. And this is more affordable families, so more families in your situation do this. Does that make sense? You got to ask that. Does that make sense? Because now you got to make sure they understand what equity protection, how it's working, and how it's going to build them. We're basically buying them time for whatever situation. Hey, this is giving me enough time. Hey, maybe what a lot of families do, I say too, what a lot of families do is refinance it to get an affordable payment. By that time, the mortgage is not going to be 300,000. It's going to be maybe 150 or less. So that's why we're going to have to refinance. That mortgage payment is going to be cut in half, more affordable. Hey, maybe family member wants to come in, or we're going to sell the equity. What is a house worth? You're going to know the equity on it. Sure, it's going to be worth more. Get another smaller house that's affordable, and you got no payment. You got to come up with solutions. They have 3 months to decide what they want to do.
And that's a problem solved, right? And I'll leave y'all with this, right? Everything we talked about at the very end, whether you sold them or not, right? But when you've showed options, being able to say, hey, so do we understand, right, the solution here, how we're solving, right, what we've uncovered here? And they're like, yeah, and be like, "Hey, I love to make sure, right, we did a great job. Like, so how does this solve your problem, right? Like, what did we put in place today? Right? And then they get to repeat it, right? If you can get someone to repeat what you did today, right, and you put a policy in place, you are not getting a chargeback. I guarantee you. Right? And then being the problem solver, hey, if you ever get in trouble financially or something happens, you call me first and I'll make sure we can lower the policy, do something to make sure this problem stays solved. Right? Here, on the few cancellations that I'll get a year, and when I say few, it's probably like 4, if that. I usually get a phone call. I don't get the email. How many of y'all get the email that you're going to have a lapse policy? Right? Do a better job of letting them know they can communicate with you. Right? My people call me. I'll get a phone call. I'll be like, hey, Joe, I don't know if I'm gonna be able to make the next payment. Is there something we can do? I get those kind of phone calls because I want to be able to solve their problem and keep it in place. So I hope that's a little nugget for you too, right? They should reach out to you, not the insurance carrier. You are their agent for life. We're putting things in place that are solving a really, really big problem of them losing a home. So I hope that helps everyone. Please, all these little nuggets, right? I challenge y'all, go get a running buddy, get those questions in place, do the FIF reset, post and band, right? Like, let's get this community of training working better, right? Saying, hey, you know what? I just did the FIF reset and wow, it was a way better appointment, right? And hopefully more people add on, right? Especially, guess what? If you do it and you post it on band, if you're building a team, guess what your team's going to do? So I'll leave y'all with that nugget. See you on the next one.
Bye, guys.